Rest in peace, Stan Lee. Memory eternal. Thank you for your work, man. We really appreciate it, man. Seriously. Stan Lee was amazing because he left worlds, man. Not only worlds, but parallel universes and all that, man. And his whole Marvel universe was a bunch of different kinds of peoples, aliens, and God only knows what else. I mean, shoot. What, robots? Elves? I don't know if elves were in there, but he had everybody in there. And he went I mean, from different cultures to different, I mean, shoot, races, everybody, man. Shoot. If it wasn't, you know, T'Challa, it was, somebody like Rom. If you guys have ever read any of the Marvel Universe handbooks, it's a profile of every superhero, man. And it's amazing. I wish I still had the ones that I had. All the Marvel superheroes, I mean, he talks about their origins and everything. It's like an encyclopedia of Marvel superheroes, man. It's a trip, dude. Like, seriously, J.R.R. Tolkien could have only dreamed of doing something like this, even though I guess you can say he did it in print. But the thing is, Stan Lee did it not only in print, he did it visually. It takes a whole lot, man, to even do what he did. And I'm not trying to downplay J.R.R. Tolkien, but the thing is, I only grew up with Stan Lee's Marvel comics, so that's going to hold a special place in my heart. And although, yes, I know The Lord of the Rings was a cartoon and then a movie later on, Marvel Comics started off as basically a visual written. And man, I mean, shoot. Stan Lee just I mean, the whole world, man, his whole world, he created. And then, his collaborators, of course, helped with that. My favorite Stan Lee, or how I got introduced to Marvel, I should say that. Sorry, because there's a lot of favorites, but Spider-Man was the first. I think probably everyone would say Spider-Man. But Spider-Man was probably the first one that I probably saw because I used to watch the cartoon in the 70s. And I somehow learned the theme song. My grandma actually recorded me singing it. It was probably the first song that I ever learned, to be honest. It was funny because, I kept repeating something about, in that song, the great big Hana. I still don't know what a Hana is. I think they just made the word up. But I liked that comic book. I'm sorry. I liked that cartoon. And I liked, the theme song was tough. It had that sort of, almost like a bop drumming type thing going on. Kind of a bop, sort of pop R&B thing going on, but really frightening, just boom, tum, 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 tum. Yeah, that beat is sick, man. But yeah, man, that was the first song that I ever learned. Who would have known that I would end up being a musician later? Memory eternal to my grandma who recorded it. May she rest in peace as well. Of course, seeing Spider-Man on the cartoon was one thing, but then seeing him on the Electric Company was another thing. I really dug the Electric Company. That was one of my favorite TV shows, and I got a double dose of Spider-Man. If he wasn't in cartoon form like the previous that I showed you, he was in live form on the Electric Company, making his once-a-week appearance there. It was a funny show, too. I really dug that. Cool to see him on there. My favorite show, hands down, though, is what was the Incredible Hulk when I was a little kid, man. I was probably about 4 years old back in the day, man, when it came out. And man, love the Incredible Hulk to the point where anything that I had to how could I say this? Green was my favorite color because of the Incredible Hulk. I loved pistachio ice cream, mint and chip ice cream, lime slushies, yes. Otter Pops that were green, popsicles. Um, there's another one. Oh my gosh, how could I? Anything that was green, I was into, and my last name has green in it, so that was even cooler because the Hulk was green, and I wanted everything green. You know. Yeah, man. I love the fact that he transformed a lot too. It was the first character that I saw gradually transform, and that got my attention. I don't know, as a little kid, I don't know why that got my attention, but it still intrigues me even to this day. I love the Incredible Hulk. One of my favorite superheroes for a long time. You know. Of course we have the villains that Marvel has. These villains stood out so much because they could almost easily have their own comic. And maybe some of them did. I got out of the comic book scene in the early 90s, but like Venom was one of them that was just, there's just a movie that came out about him. And I found out also one of my friends kind of helped on that movie. I didn't know until I saw her name in the credits. But yeah, Stan Lee, oh man, another Venom pick. One thing about Stan Lee also, or Marvel, is that, they always had the best artists, from Jack King Kirby to people like Todd McFarlane, who is, his depiction of Spider-Man is right here, to John Silvestri and Dan Green. These guys, it's almost like their characters, the way that they drew the characters was their own signature. And it was just amazing to, see that. And I was inspired by it to the point where some friends of mine and me, we were trying to basically kind of do our own comic book thing in junior high, just for fun. I would draw, they would ink and color. It was really cool. It was like short-lived, but we were really inspired by like a lot of these comic book artists, even as young as like 12, 11, 12, 13 years old. Another thing I have to mention is, like, of course, there were series that I would like to think Marvel was probably one of the first to kind of start doing series, but not only series, but series that overlapped. Inferno was like, that was a crazy situation, man. It's like the X-Men almost like went evil or something, man. These demons like got a hold of, a lot of these cats and started influencing them. It's a whole series that, like, my friends and I think we even traded comics just to read a part of what happened, or just we talk about it. We were really into this stuff in junior high, man. And see, I think that's when also Angel became Avenging Angel too. I forget. There's Storm and there's Wolverine right there, and Havoc looking all evil. Yeah, it was a crazy series. This also overlapped into other comic books like Alpha Flight, and I think the New Mutants, and a few other X-Men associates. It was not just the X-Men comic that this was in. The stories, it's almost like you had to have the whole story of all of them just to know everything that happened. It was a trip comic. Whoever wrote that and whose concept was that was amazing, So yeah. Wolverine stood out to me. I don't know how he became one of my favorites, but maybe because he, wasn't Captain America or Spider-Man. He wasn't your typical superhero. And although those guys came from real situations, it was almost like Wolverine and a lot of the X-Men, you seen their struggle because they didn't have anything happen to them to where they were receiving these superpowers or whatever. They grew up with these extra powers to the point where they were, outcasted for it. Like people, they looked down on them. They were the mutants. They were called mutants. And maybe, the fact that they were kind of outcast attracted me to that, because I felt like that at times. Being very different, as a youth and even as an adult, but more so as a youth back then, because that's when I was reading comics and stuff. And Wolverine, of course, the adamantium claws got my attention as well. One thing about Wolverine that's a trip, I would wear a Wolverine t-shirt, around my neighborhood, and some of the neighborhood kids were calling me X-Men because of it. Speaking of X-Men and Wolverine and the Incredible Hulk, two of my favorite superheroes in one comics, I didn't know until probably much later. I'm just speaking as a kid. I found out this in probably my late teens or whatever. No, actually, it was before that. But anyways, sorry, I'm always rambling. Um, Wolverine actually first appeared in the Incredible Hulk, and ironically, I tripped out because it was around the time that I was born, November 1st, 1974. So it was in the month of November of 1974. I don't know if it was on the first, but that's when Wolverine appeared in the Incredible Hulk. Two of my favorite superheroes, man. Of course, you see Wolverine looks like he has a cat suit on. It looks like almost like a tiger almost. That was his original suit. That's how it looked. And that character in the background is the Wendigo. But yeah, ironically, the Wolverine showed up in the Incredible Hulk. Oh, by the way, Wolverine was known as Weapon X back then too. Wolverine showed up in the Incredible Hulk in the same month that I was born. And same year. Crazy, huh? One thing I gotta give props to Stan Lee about is probably being one of the first to really have black superheroes in his comics. They weren't some kind of subservient role or some kind of or some kind of docile character. These were actual superheroes that had their own characters, and just things about them that stood out, just like any other comic book character. This is Black Panther right here, an earlier version of him. Luke Cage is another one. I remember seeing Luke Cage in Iron Fist. I'm sorry, Luke Cage and Iron Fist. They were always chilling together, and the fact that Stan Lee, also had a TV show off of Luke Cage, independent of Iron Fist. I thought that was really cool. I haven't seen it yet. Everyone told me it was awesome. The cool thing is that to see that there are, characters like this that have gone on to be on TV or in cinema. I mean, Black Panther grossed a lot, Really cool stuff, man. Really cool. Glad that that movie was made, and that Luke Cage became a series. One of my favorite ones that I've been out of the comic scene, so I don't know if he's around much, but I really dug him as a kid, was the Falcon. Man, I thought he was so cool. He used to have that Falcon on his arm and all that. And I had a Falcon toy. My dad made it a point to make sure that I knew about these black superheroes as well, so it was cool. I think he was the one that bought me the toy and also the comic of the Falcon. I think that's how I found out about him. The thing about Marvel, Marvel and Stan Lee, they were real, man. They used real situations. It wasn't just a fairy tale superhero thing, or, the damsel in distress gets saved by a superhero. These were real people that went through real things, man. And you could relate to them more. I related to Marvel Comics superheroes more than I related to anything in DC. I didn't mind DC. It was cool to see some of the things on there, but Marvel, on TV, like cartoons and all, but Marvel has always appealed to me more than DC. It's almost like DC had to catch up, even putting in black superheroes like the Black Vulcan and all that. Like, yeah, man, like Marvel was real. And I just thought it was cool, the fact that they even got specific on ethnic backgrounds, like like T'Challa, like being from Wakanda, and just like Rom, he was like a Romanian gypsy, You know, I mean, there's so many different like characters and like where they're from and all that. Like I said, if you guys ever get a chance to get one of them Marvel Universe books, check that out, man. It's really cool and insightful. It shows you where everyone's from. This is the original X-Men, you know? And this is the Avengers. Probably not the original Avengers, but yeah, this is the Avengers. Really admire you, man. So, hey, memory be eternal. I'm sorry, your memory eternal. Stan Lee, you will be missed, and thank you for leaving uh, these characters for us. Peace. Rest in peace. One thing I made a mistake on, P.S. I made a mistake. Um, it was Mark Silvestri, not John Silvestri, as far as the artist that I mentioned. Also, I should have also mentioned, I'm going to take time to do this, there's a Captain Marvel movie coming out. Speaking of black superheroes uh, of the Marvel Universe. I'm glad to see that she's getting shine because I feel that she hasn't gotten shine as much. I remember her with the Avengers, and I know there's another Captain Marvel, but this is the Black American Captain Marvel, from what I know. Um, and I think it was the last movie Stan Lee worked on or appeared in. So yeah, memory eternal, Stan Lee. Thank you for your work.